In MIDI mode, you'll find all parameters that control how the 2500 sends and receives information. There are 3 pages in MIDI mode: Transmit, Receive, and Channels. When you first enter MIDI mode, you'll be on the Transmit page. If you have the rack, you probably not need to work with the parameters on this page. There are a few things worth mentioning, however. If you're using the local keyboard channel parameter that we described at the beginning of this video, the K2500 will actually send incoming MIDI information out the MIDI out port. You can then use the controller parameters in the right column of the screen to remap one type of MIDI controller to another. Consult your manual for more on this. If you turn the buttons parameter on, the 2500 will send out a sysx message for each button you press. If you record these messages into an external sequencer, you can play back the sequence to remote control various changes, such as disk loading or changing other parameters. Press the Receive button. Here you'll find parameters that control how the 2500 responds to incoming MIDI data. You would normally want to leave the MIDI mode set to multi, so that the 2500 will respond multi-timbrally. If you have problems with the 2500 not responding to sustain pedal commands from your controller, try setting the All Notes Off parameter to Ignore. Otherwise, just leave it on normal. The Program Change Type parameter lets you select the method the 2500 uses to respond to program and bank changes. The default is Extended. If you load in the general MIDI disk that came with your instrument, this will change to QA 0 through 127. This sets the 2500 so that it will only call up the 128 general MIDI programs you loaded in. If you then want to be able to access all of the other programs, you will need to set it back to Extended. You can also load the reset master file on the disk, which will change back this parameter along with the other master parameters that were changed when you loaded the GM disk. For an explanation on the different program change types, consult your manual. You will notice that the velocity and pressure map parameters are found on the MIDI receive and transmit pages, as well as on the master page. Each page is used for a different aspect of control. If you have the rack, you will want to use the parameters in the receive page. This will control how the 2500 responds to incoming velocity and pressure messages. If you have the keyboard, you will want to use the parameters on the master page. This will control how the 2500 responds to its own keyboard. Finally, you can use the parameters on the transmit page to scale the velocity and pressure being sent out of the MIDI output, especially useful if you have a slave synth that is sensitive to higher velocities. Velocity and pressure maps work by assigning musical dynamics to specific velocities and scaling them between each setting. There are 7 different velocity maps and 7 different pressure maps included in the 2500, but you can also make your own. To create a velocity map, highlight the parameter and press Edit. You will see a graph showing the map. Along the top, you will see parameters representing 8 different dynamic amounts. The numbers indicate actual velocities that are tied to that dynamic. You can scroll to each parameter and change its value. Once you have something you like, you can name it and save that map. Pressure maps work the same, even though they may be used to control things other than amplitude. Although it isn't related to MIDI, the receive page is also where you will find the SCSI ID for the 2500. The default SCSI ID for the 2500 is number 6, but it can be changed to any number between 0 and 7. Just make sure it is different from the IDs of other SCSI devices in your chain. For descriptions of the rest of the parameters on this page, consult your manual. The Channels page contains parameters that can be set for each specific channel. The display only shows one channel at a time. To view the various channels, use the channel bank buttons. The Enable parameter allows you to turn a channel on or off. Once off, it will not respond to any MIDI data. You can call up a program and set volume and pan levels for each channel. These levels will change if you send subsequent MIDI pan or volume messages. If you want to keep the program pan and volume settings as they are, turn the lock parameters on. They prevent the 2500 from responding to program change pan or volume information for that particular channel. The last two parameters are output pair and output gain. The default settings for these parameters is program, which means that the settings found on the output page in the program editor will be followed. However, you can override this so that no matter what program is on the channel, it will have a specific setting. For example, you can change the output pair parameter on channel 1 so that any program called up on channel 1 will be assigned to the B outputs. The program change soft button allows you to send out a program change on any channel without affecting the programs assigned to the various channels within the 2500. The Reset Channel soft button gives you a quick way to set all 16 channels back to their default parameters.